It's time for that Covrprice Top 10. We are going back 4 years. All right, guys, here we go. We're going back 4 years on this Covrprice video. I know I haven't been doing videos in a few weeks, took a little bit of time off, but now I am back, and unfortunately, I'm coming back with some kind of bad news. We kind of lost a major part of the comic community. For you guys who are on YouTube watching this, you've probably watched our friend TiVo over at Lords of the Long Box. Unfortunately, TiVo has passed away, and he's part of the comic community. He has been around for years. He has been on YouTube for years. He's been working with Covrprice for years, and this was an absolute shock. And for you guys who are on Instagram, I'm sure you've seen just all the posts that have come out. Absolutely shocking, heartbreaking. My condolences go out to his family because it's just I can't. It's just terrible. It's like awful. So again, condolences to TiVo's family and all the Lords of the Long Box, everybody over there. So kind of a sad start to the week, and I do apologize for that, but I think it is important to kind of make it, pay some respects to TiVo. So with that, we're going to get into our list and start with number 10. This is X-Men Adventures number 1. The animated X-Men series was one of the more beloved animated series from the 90s, and back in 2020, many people speculated that Disney might revive the series due to the ability to use certain X-Men as an avatar on the sign-in page. Those who speculated were indeed correct, as the series was brought back and received tons of acclaim. Fans and critics alike have lauded the series as one of the best things the MCU has done post-Endgame. Copies of the X-Men animated comic shot up in 2020 to nearly $30 for raw copies and $80 for 9.8s. 4 years later, this book has dropped to $12 for raw copies, but has risen to a high of $175 for 9.8 graded. The difference makes this book a push with room to grow for raw copies as a new generation of fans are exposed to the iconic team and series. X-Men 97, I think it's not debatable, is probably it's the best thing that the MCU has put out on Disney+. Post-Endgame, I would say Guardians of the Galaxy was probably just as good or better than X-Men 97. But on Disney+, X-Men 97 is so good. Like every episode, maybe the Jubilee was a little like filler-ish, but phenomenal cartoon, story, series, whatever. It was great. Can't say enough good things about it. Let's get to number 9. This is Bone Parish number 1. In 2020, the news of Netflix signing a first-look deal with Boom Studios was very fresh, and many collectors were scrambling to pick up the first issue from various Boom titles. Bone Parish, an excellent horror series from Cullen Bunn, was one title many keyed in for. 4 years later, we are now in 2024, and while there hasn't been much news, fans are in great anticipation of news of what properties may see a live adaptation. Raw copies for Bone Parish number 1 are currently in the $13 range versus 2020 prices of $25, while graded copies are $75 now versus $90 then. This book holds a ton of potential if it is indeed adapted, but based on today's prices, this book is a minor bust. You're going to 2020, so you're going to get some numbers here right as COVID is hitting. So like we haven't hit the 2021, 2022 boom, so you may see some pluses, a couple pushes and a little bit of, a bust, but let's get to number 8. This is Something is Killing the Children, number 1, the unlocked Jenny Friesen variant. Whew. The same information that sparked the sales of Bone Parish in 2020 fueled the fire that is now Something is Killing the Children. This property has now hired writers and is in the process of being made. So the steady release of information has led to this issue and the series as a whole to continue to grow. The prices in 2020 were rising, but based on the 2024 prices, they were a steal. A raw copy in 2020 was $11, but today that same copy will cost you $113. A graded copy is not as far apart in price, but is still higher than 4 years ago, as 9.8 graded copies were $61, now $159. This book is huge boom, and honestly still has room to grow. This is what I talk about. Everybody's saying the comic book market is down, it's down, it's down. Yes, it's down from 2021 and 2022. I agree, 100%. But look at 2020. This is a major title, a major book, and it is up. So overall, is the market up from past? Yes. I mean, everything in 2021 and 2022 were going crazy. Not just comic books, toys, cars, sports cards, Pokemon, Yu-Gi-Oh, Magic, everything was going up for those years. So people are nervous and you know, the earth's not falling apart. The market is coming down to where it should be, but overall, it's still up. Let's get to number 7. This is You're the Villain, Hell Arisen, number 3. Punchline was still a hot topic in 2020 as collectors decided between this book and Batman 89. The book for the character. 4 years have passed, and while demand for Punchline has died down, her books are surprisingly maintaining. This book in 2020 was hovering for $30 to $32 for raw, and those prices are just slightly lower at about $29. Graded copies have also held pretty well, with the 2020 prices of being about $130 for 9.8 versus $120 for the same book today. This book is about a push 4 years later. 4 years later, remember, before the boom. Let's get to number 6. This is Doorway to Nightmare number 1. This issue is the first series of Madame Xanadu. Oh man, who plays an integral part in the Justice League Dark team. Fans have been speculating on the team showing up somewhere, but in 2020 we got confirmation that there was an actual Justice League Dark adaptation coming to HBO. This news increased prices for raw and graded copies. $40 for raw, $287 for graded. Since then, much has changed concerning the DC film universe, and apparently the Justice League Dark movie has been shelved. Those 2020 prices have dipped for raw, but graded 9.8 copies have jumped to close to $700, $662 back in December. While we await more information from James Gunn about these characters and their film TV debut, this book could be a huge bargain at a current raw price. At current prices, though, this book is a boom 4 years later. This is the type of book and character that I talk about when we talk about James Gunn and the DCU. This is a minor character that has somewhat relevance in a Justice League Dark story who I could see James Gunn bringing to the forefront. It's possible Madame Xanadu someday could be a household name the way Rocket and Groot are today. These are those obscure characters that James does so well with. I'm just saying, let's get to number 5. The Infinity Gauntlet number 1. In 2020, we were all in the COVID era, and we were all mostly shut inside. This led many people to discover the Marvel films and comics from which they were loosely adapted from. This was one of the possible explanations for why the Infinity Gauntlet number 1 issue popped up to the top 10 for near minutes. They were selling at $20. 9/8 were going for $135. It's now 2024, and while I expected to find these prices have dropped, they've actually risen slightly. Near mint raw copies are now $21, 9/8 at $150. The slight increase in price makes this book a boom 4 years later. It is interesting to see that this book continues to be relevant, and hopefully other books that hold this type of importance will follow. Again, I stressed it earlier, 2020, you're before the boom. You're before it, and we are up. Even on a book like this, we are up from 2020. Just saying. Let's get to number 4. This is Swamp Thing number 50. As mentioned above with number 6, the news of the Justice League Dark adaptation pushed this book to some great sales in 2020. The fan interest for the adaptation led to raw copies selling at $29 and graded 9/8 for $178. The essential cancellation of the project has led to prices dropping a bit for graded copies, while raws are slightly higher 4 years later. Raw copies are now $35 for near mint. Graded copies are down to $134. This book is a slight bust with much potential to rise again if the project or some of the characters are introduced to a new generation of fans. This is the Justice League Dark. Again, this is a James Gunn type project as far as I'm concerned. Now, I could totally be wrong, and let me stress this. Do not do what I say. Do not go out there and buy comic books because I say something. Do your own research, do your due diligence, take what I say with a grain of salt, a small piece of information, and go get more pieces of information to collect all this information to make an educated decision. Do not listen to any one single person on the internet, whether it's YouTube, whether it's Twitter, whether it's Instagram. Collect the information and make an educated decision if you're going to spend your money on something, whether you expect it to go up or down. Do your research. I'm just giving you a small piece of information. Let's get to number 3. This is Killadelphia number 1. In 2020, we also received confirmation of an upcoming adaptation for Killadelphia. The Image comic title was thriving and fans were buying raw prices. Raw prices were $9 for the first issue. Graded 9/8 were going for $60. 4 years later, we have had very little news concerning the upcoming adaptation. This lack of news, however, hasn't stopped the aftermarket from remaining the same for raw copies and slightly above 2020 prices for graded copies. Raw copies for issue number 1 can be purchased for $10 in 2024, which is $1 more than 2020, while graded 9/8 copies have jumped to $96, which is 40% higher. These prices make Killadelphia number 1 a boom 4 years later, with a lot of room for growth if and when we see more news. This is a great list. Every time we do these things, it's bust, it's bust, it's bust, it's bust. But now on this one, I'm just making myself laugh thinking of jokes I'm not going to say on camera. With this particular book, more than half of this list has increased in value from 2020. Again, this is before the boom of 2021 and 2022. Even the later half of 2020, the book started going up and going crazy. This is more. This is a more accurate depiction of the comic book market as a whole. Let's get to number 2. But before we do, I want to remind everyone, check out Covrprice.com. Use the discount code below to get yourself a discount. Use it. It's a great tool. The Covrprice.com tool. I mean, it's a great tool as a collector. All right, with that, let's get to number 2. This is Killadelphia number 1, local comic shop day. Or local comic shop day? I forgot what that is. Anyway, the 2019 variant. This is the second entry for this Image comic title, Killadelphia. This version was the local comic shop day variant, and fans were seeking out copies as raw copies were selling for $25 and a handful of graded copies sold for $40. As mentioned above, the lack of news typically leads to prices dropping, yet prices have grown a bit in the past 4 years. Raw prices now sell for $29, while CGC 9.8 copies have passed $70. They're at about $72. This price increase across the board makes this book a boom 4 years later. This property has tons of potential, and even more so if fans accept it. So these current prices could seem like a deal down the road. All right, with that, we are going to get to our number 1 book. This was a DC and Image heavy list. Did we even see a single Marvel book? It's all Image and DC because a lot of news dropped at this time 4 years ago. All right, with that, let's get to our number 1 book. This is Justice League Dark number 1. This was the third Justice League Dark related book to reach the top 10 in April of 2020. The news of J.J. Abrams, Alias, and Lost, we know J.J. Abrams, had collectors scrambling to pick up any related book, but the most sought-after book was clearly the team's debut issue. Raw copies sold for $50. Graded saw highs of $193 for 9/8. 4 years later, the prices seem to have dropped for both. Raw copies are now hovering around $20. Graded 9/8 are selling for about $144. This drop in price for raw and graded copies makes this book a bust 4 years later. There's a lot of reason for optimism, though, as Gunn finds his footing with his characters and newly formed universe. I'm telling you guys, do your own research, do your due diligence, but I feel that the Justice League Dark is the perfect combination of characters that James Gunn could just have so much fun with and just crush it. Look at the Guardians of the Galaxy. It's like it's a great comparison. Just oddball characters. I'm an optimist. I'm an optimist. All right, that's it. Guys, make sure you come back tomorrow. I'm dropping a video every single day this week. We're doing another Cover Price week. We're going to go back, I believe, 1 year. Are we going to go to 1 year? I'm not sure what we're going to do, but we're going to go back. And in honor of TiVo, I do want to say keep digging in those long boxes. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good one.